Good to see you. All right, take your Bibles. We're in Luke chapter 14, verse 25 through 35. And looking forward to expounding this passage for you and praying that you'll be able to prayerfully reconsider your commitment to the Lord today and reevaluate where you stand in terms of your commitment to follow Jesus this morning. I want to give credit to a few people that have been really brilliant in terms of their exposition of this passage. Matthew Henry, Geldenaes, Weersby, Carson, and Hendrickson. As we look at 10 verses of Scripture, Luke chapter 14, picking up from last week. When you read through these verses, you will find a repeated line. And I'm always paying attention for stuff like this in the Bible. Jesus had this to say 3 times in 10 verses. If one does not, then you cannot be my disciple. If one does not, then you cannot be my disciple. And then the third time to drum it home in verse 33. If one does not, then you cannot be my disciple. So, after the fact that Jesus disclosed himself, remember the big bomb that was landed on that VIP dinner last Sunday? Jesus disclosed himself as the host in the picture of that parable. We then realize as readers of that passage that there's application for us in the fact that we have been invited to a banquet. Jesus referred to himself, this is my banquet. I'm planning a banquet, thinking heaven, thinking glory. And I'm hoping that everyone has RSVP'd, which I equated to conversion. You've put your faith in Jesus. You've turned from your sin in repentance. You've committed your life to him in terms of Lord, and I'm going to follow Jesus now until I see him face to face. Then, of course, a commitment has been made. The banquet, Jesus said, will be full. There will be no seats available at the banquet because he's going to make every effort and attempt through his church to fill that banquet hall in glory one day. I then learn that both making the commitment, as in RSVPing, as in committing your life to Christ on an occasion, and following through with that commitment are both essential to be a follower of Jesus, to be a disciple of Jesus. And those two things are synonyms. To be a disciple of Jesus Christ means to be a follower of Jesus. So I guess the question to ask up front would be, are you a follower of Jesus? And I'd love for all of us, myself included, to examine our lives and the commitment we've maybe once made in light of what is going on now in terms of our following. So let's do that. Point number 1. Following Jesus means saying goodbye. Following Jesus means saying goodbye. Write that down somewhere and we'll unpack what saying goodbye means. Firstly, saying goodbye means saying goodbye to your people. I'll give you all 3. Then saying goodbye to yourself, and then saying goodbye to your things. So let's look at each of those. Jesus leaves that VIP dinner. You can read about it in the preceding verses of this chapter. He's at the home of a Pharisee, a ruler of the Pharisees, and by now his reputation has grown immensely. A large crowd, the Bible says, look at your first verse there, verse 25. A large crowd follows Jesus. And I look at this crowd, just like Jesus no doubt was aware, there's a big crowd behind him wherever he went. Approaching Jerusalem, by the way, on his way to the cross. And I learned that crowds can be deceiving. I'm sure you've worked this out in life already. You can't really trust a crowd. I wondered, why is this crowd gathered like this? It dawned on me that crowds had gathered around Jesus many times before in his ministry, and normally not for the right reasons. So they maybe have come for food, because he's quite famous now as a miracle worker that could feed the 5,000 plus. Maybe they came for healing because Jesus is quite famous because of his miracles in terms of healing. Maybe they came for the show because it seemed like wherever Jesus went there was going to be a show and a showdown with the Pharisees, and that no doubt was something to watch. Or maybe some found or started to believe Jesus to be a superhero in terms of coming to deliver people from the oppression of Rome. And that surely was definitely the essence or the atmosphere around Jesus coming into Jerusalem, which we'll look at a little bit later, not too far from now, and of course leading up to the cross. So Jesus knew what was going on in the hearts of the crowd, and he knows what's going on in your heart as well this morning. He knows, I think this is the way theologians talk about it, if I remember correctly, it's called carnal knowledge. Jesus knows how hot we are burning for him or how cold we are toward him. And so wearing a title is not enough. To say, I'm a Christian, I'm a follower of Jesus, or I'm a Jesus follower, churchgoer, all of those things are not enough when it comes to Jesus' knowledge of what's going on in your heart. And being a part of a crowd like this is not good enough either, because you can't really blend in when it comes to Jesus. Jesus is aware on this occasion that there are sincere followers in the crowd, and then there are those that I would call more selfish followers. They really haven't let go of what is central to our sinfulness, and that is our self. And so they are following Jesus, but they're following him for selfish gain. So I wonder if that's maybe somebody sitting here this morning. No doubt there were others maybe that had come for some other reason, and they were just, or maybe they just following the crowd. I don't know why. There's some people like that always in life. Wherever there's a crowd, I'm just going to join the crowd, not really thinking through why it is I'm a part of this crowd. So with that backdrop, Jesus turns around and he thins out the crowd. And he does so in a very powerful way by using illustrations and definitions of what discipleship is actually about, what following him is all about. Verse 26, have a look. If anyone comes to me and does not hate, look at that word, does not hate his own father and his mother, his wife, his children, his brothers and his sisters, he cannot be my disciple. Oh, hate. That seems a little bit harsh coming from Jesus' mouth. Now, some would like to take that literally, but we can't, because Jesus has had a few things to say about hate. Number one, hate is sinful. To hate somebody is equivalent in Jesus' economy, God's economy, to murder, if you know what Jesus had to say there earlier on in the Gospels. Jesus also had something to say about loving your enemies. So why would he say love your enemies but hate your family? That doesn't make much sense at all. And he also had God, Trinity God, had something to say about honoring your parents. Have you read that in the 10 Commandments? So why would he go against his own law, his own moral law, and now tell followers to hate their parents when before that was established as a commandment of God, to honor your parents? So we can't land literally. We have to take this to heart some other way. And so my attempts to wrestle with this passage, I've come up with a bit of a definition here that I want to share with you that I think is accurate in terms of what Jesus was saying on this occasion. Jesus was saying that following him requires a certain level of love. Okay, and I'm using that word very carefully. A certain level of devotion, the title of the sermon. And when compared to love for your family, for example, wife, children, brothers, sisters, father, mother, it should look like hate, is what Jesus was saying. He was saying following me requires us to love him so much that all other love seems like hate in comparison. That's what Jesus was saying. And when you view it that way, and conclude it that way from looking at Scripture as a whole, this is a big ask. So I'm not making light of the ask. I'm not making light of the expectation, because some teachers of the Bible will say, well, obviously Jesus didn't mean to hate your parents, so now we can soften the blow. No. The blow is still hard. The blow is still very, very hard from the passage, and I think you're going to feel that this morning with me. So let's unpack it with that as the backdrop. When it comes down to it, if you had to apply the concept, the principle of these verses, I would say that when parents oppose God's will for your life, let's put this in very, very personal terms. God calls you to, let's start with salvation and other things, to serve him in the center of his will. When parents oppose that, when family members get in the way of that, Jesus was saying on this occasion, follow me. Remain devoted to me. Make a commitment to follow me. Such is the affection that I'm expecting from you. All our relationships, every single one of them. Let's think spouse for a minute, because at some level I found this to be kind of offensive in terms of my love for my wife, Amber. I thought, God, this is a big ask to now compare loves like this. But in terms of all relationships, my conclusion through these words of Jesus is that those relationships need to bow low to our complete devotion and adoration to Christ. I didn't say this earlier, but it came to mind in a conversation between services today, that using the analogy of my wife, the way I can love her most, in fact, let's look at it in a positive way. The way I can love her like Jesus expects me to love her is to love Jesus most and more than her. Think about that. When we husbands get it right in learning how to affectionately commit lovingly to a Lord Jesus Christ in our lives, it's then that we can actually love properly our wives the most. So following Jesus is not a popular thing. This crowd had gathered, and may today be an example, a challenge, an exercise where we can examine the reasons for us being part of the crowd and again challenge those claims that we've made. Oh yeah, I'm a Christian. Yeah, you can count me in. I'm a member of that church. I'm a follower of Jesus. We make those claims very bold, but then in light of this backdrop, I feel sometimes we're not following through as well as we could. There's more. It's coming later. Okay, so let's just keep that as the backdrop initially. So we need to say goodbye to your people. Secondly, to yourself. I left out a little phrase. Some of you probably noticed that when I was reading verse 26. It's the phrase, and even one's own life. Look at it there. So in amongst, hating your father, mother, your children, your brothers, your sisters, there is this phrase, even hating your own life. Oh, I hate my own life. It's heavy language. Now, before we throw it out as being just flippant, Jesus chose that word very carefully, very, very carefully, to show how much he is expecting love from his followers. A 100% commitment that we need to be giving in terms of our devotion and our following of the Lord. Not only are we to love Jesus more than our family and our friends, we are to love him more than our own selves. And I've learned this about myself. I love myself a lot. Honest, we love ourselves a lot. We in terms of our time and our money, treasure, and our talents, we tend to be biased toward spending those things on ourselves. I don't need to prove that to you. Let's cut to the chase. If we call ourselves follower of Jesus, if I had to ask you the question, are you a follower of Christ? What would your answer be? You don't have to say it out loud. If I had to ask it a different way, are you willing to die for him if need be? Because that's what it means ultimately to hate one's own life. I would be saying exactly the same thing. I would be asking the exact same thing. A follower of Jesus and somebody prepared, willing to die for him, according to what he had to say here, was one in the same thing. We need to be prepared to say goodbye to ourselves. Then thirdly, to your things. Are you serious, Pastor? I didn't want this for Sunday morning. I wanted to come and just gain all sorts of things that make me feel happy. We're getting there. But this is where Jesus starts, to thin out the crowd. And I need to do the same, to be faithful to his word. Following Jesus means saying goodbye to your people, saying goodbye to yourself, and saying goodbye to your things. Look at verse 33. The third of these little statements. So therefore, if any one of you does not renounce all that he has, anyone who does not renounce all that he has cannot be my disciple. I believe, in looking at these 10 verses, verse 33 is the summary verse of it all. It is the key verse of this passage. Therefore, he's summing up, and he makes a concluding statement after 3 repeats. I mean, this is the verse you need to memorize. What does it mean to renounce then? Look at the word. In the ESV, it is, we have to renounce to be a disciple. The word renounce actually means to say goodbye. So now you see where I got my little sub-points in this message. It literally means to say goodbye, to forsake. This verse sums up the text, and I would put the list so far, this is the list so far, of renouncing, of forsaking, of saying goodbye to loved ones, to money, to possessions, everything that your heart holds fast, your desires, your plans, your ideals, your interests, and this list goes on and on and on. Because this verse 33 says we need to renounce it all. Take a pen to your Bible and mark that little word all. Renounce all. Jesus was not messing around. He was not messing around. He said we need to renounce all to be defined as a follower. Not just some, not just a few things. Not RSV, make a commitment, pray a prayer, and then abandon following until the banquet. That's not going to fly. No, Jesus was saying, being a follower of Jesus is not just a new title. I'm a Christian, or I'm a believer, or I'm a follower. It's complete devotion to Him. It's loving Him most kind of devotion. Radically most than anything else in your life. So already I'm sure many are thinking, well, I'm not too sure if I've arrived there. Maybe I'm in the process of getting there. Maybe there's a few things that are in competition with my devotion for Jesus, and that's good. That's what this morning is all about. Following Jesus means saying goodbye. Now, I found this very personal. I did. And I'm sure you're finding it very personal right now. It's kind of like, people say, up in your grill, up in your space. This is my space. I don't really want to tamper with this. This is, personal stuff. Well, I hope you're doing okay. There's one more little phase before we get to the end of this message. Here we go. Number 2, following Jesus means heavy lifting. It means heavy lifting. Following Jesus means saying goodbye. Following Jesus, if you're going to define it biblically, means also heavy lifting. Verse 27. Whoever does not bear his own cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. The word come there means to come behind. And I love this picture of the fact that we can't actually follow unless there's somebody in front. I mean, it seems like almost a thing not to be said, but it's beautiful to think about this picture of following entails doing some things to follow, but we have to have somebody to lead, to go ahead. And that's what Jesus is pulling together in verse 27. Come behind me, then you will be one of my disciples. And you need to do that by bearing a cross, your own cross. So let's look at this language. Matthew 10, Luke chapter 9, previously in the same book, these similar words were used by Jesus, to take up a cross. What does it mean to take up a cross? I want to define that very clearly for you today. Many would apply it to all sorts of things. They will say this phrase in conversation casually. Oh, that's my cross to bear. You've heard it, right? My cross to bear. And they'll miss the essence of what Jesus is saying entirely. Because they'll be referring to things like affliction. Man, that's just my cross to bear. I've got a grumpy atmosphere in my work environment, my cross to bear. Other kinds of trials in life. I'm sick. Got the flu, my cross to bear. Got car trouble, my cross to bear. I've got a cranky neighbor, he's just my cross to bear. And miss the entire essence of what Jesus is saying in what it means to pick up a cross. You know why? When Jesus said these words right now, thinning out the crowd, over the hill, on the way to Jerusalem, the Romans were perfecting the torture of crucifixion. Now, if you can imagine that being the backdrop of what is being said here, there is no possible way that people could conclude that Jesus was speaking about a cranky neighbor or the flu or car trouble. I'm sorry, it can't be done. It cannot be done. So what was Jesus saying? He was saying exactly what he meant. He was saying that taking up a cross is being willing to take up your cross, which is meaning to die for Jesus' sake, maybe even in a harsh, brutal way. That's what he was saying. He didn't mix his words. He got the attention of the crowd, and I'm sure quite a few of them slowed down in pace and maybe dropped off from following him. Taking up a cross is equal to being willing to die for Jesus' sake and being willing to die for Jesus' cause. Are you there, follower? Have you come to a place where more than just an RSVP, you have signed up to follow Jesus, even if it costs you your life? Warren Wiersbe defines taking up your cross this way. It means daily identification with Christ. Why daily? Because the other Gospels use the word daily. Because Jesus used the word daily in other texts. Daily take up your cross. You can find it there. A daily identification. This is where we're going to end today. A daily identification with Christ in a few things like shame, suffering, and surrender to God's will. It's saying in the morning, Lord, I'm one of your followers, so you went this road, I'm going to follow the same road as well. And let me just tell you, the signboard on the road is a signboard of shame, suffering, and surrender to God's will. Remember those words? Not my will, but yours be done, Lord. So whatever's in store for me, my own cross for today, in following you on this track of being your will, God, for your sake, for your fame, for your renown, man, I'm going to sign up for that today. And I'm going to do it again tomorrow. And I'm going to do it again the next day so that I'm found following you to the end. That proves the fact that I sincerely joined the crowd by my RSVP. And it also promises the fact that I one day will be seated in the full banquet hall. A lot hinges on this, church. I'm not just saying this to be all, spectacular today. This is the way Jesus would define following. It has a start and it has an end, a banquet, but it's a process that we're a part of by definition. The big question is, are we following, and are we following well? Here's the definition again with some extra words. Warren Wiersbe said, taking up your cross as a daily identification with Christ in shame, suffering, surrender to God's will. It means death to self. We've talked about that. It means death to your own plans. Talked about that. It means death to your own ambitions. Talked about that. Saying goodbye. And it means a willingness to serve him as he directs. He's in charge. I'm following. He's leading. A cross is something we willingly accept from God as part of his will for our life. Amen. This is some heavy lifting. I want to be the first one to admit it. It is a big ask of all of us. So, to make it clear and to make it relatable, Jesus uses 3 illustrations to drive the point home. And I want you to fall in love with these. Because I don't think we're going to follow well unless we understand them and fall in love with these. The 3 illustrations / parables are the building of a tower, a king going to war, and salt. Find them in your Bible. Mark them in the margins so you have a nice outline of what's being said to drive home this point of what a follower is all about. Nobody will set out to build a new building, it doesn't matter who you are, unless you first count the cost. That's the wording that's used here. It means to calculate the cost. I have a national diploma in this. It's called quantity surveying, where you go and you work out how many bricks you need and how many liters of water you need and how many nails and how much meterage of wood you need for a building so that you can say to a client, you can afford this. And so this is what's going to cost the building. At the end of the day, you can do it. Nobody wants to, this is what Jesus said. He said, nobody wants to be embarrassed by, can you imagine, building foundations, which you can't even see, and part of a superstructure of a building, and then, oh, sorry, no more funds. That stands as a monument, an embarrassing monument to your lack of calculation and pre-thought. So you got to think before you sign up, is what is being said here in light of our discipleship. So don't come to Jesus all casually and say, oh Lord, you can have my life, without carefully considering how much it's going to cost you. This is the story first. Then secondly, a king. A king goes to war. Obviously, there's an army around the corner, and they have 20,000 soldiers, and your army has 10,000 soldiers. That's what Jesus is saying. No king is going to go to battle with those statistics. First, you're going to count the soldiers, make sure you have the right resources and the right ammunition to go to war like that. Otherwise, he says a little phrase there, which has caused me much pain this week because it changes our interpretation of this passage radically. He says, otherwise it would be better for you to make peace with that enemy. Try and get the picture clear, because it's really an incredibly detailed illustration. Rather you make peace with the enemy than go to battle with bad statistics. 10,000 versus 20,000 is what Jesus said. Then thirdly, salt. Salt is good if it's salty. But if it loses its saltiness, it has no usefulness at all. It is no value and is useless. So I thought to myself, salt, does it ever lose its saltiness? Not really. Not in my world. it just remains salty. So what is Jesus talking about? Well, in old days, try and imagine this. We didn't have all the fancy science of producing pure salt. So in the salt often, when they collect it from the pans, let's go old school here, there would be a whole lot of dirt involved. Sand, dust, and debris, and impurities that were part of the salt. And so salt was sold, a very valuable thing, apparently, and it was sold in terms of its purity. It's an incredible illustration. So the more sand and impurity, the less salty it would be. You put that into your food, it's not going to taste so good. But the more pure it was, the more beautiful it would taste, and the more valuable that salt would be in terms of its sale and its value on the marketplace. One other thing he mentioned in terms of the saltiness that I didn't mention earlier was the fact that you can't fix this very easy. You can probably take some dirty salt and try and get the sand out of there. It's not an easy job, right? It's not. It's almost, in fact, Jesus was saying it's impossible. To get it completely pure from all the impurity, almost impossible. So now having those three pictures in your mind, the building of the tower, I could say building there, but he used the word tower, I think, for a reason, and the king going to war and the salty salt in your mind, I want to make some application. And I've put this application under some headings for you to remember. You ready for this? Number one, the first application, in terms of following Jesus being heavy lifting, first application is we are stones to build the church. Take this to heart. We are stones to build the church. I believe that's a statement that summarizes what Jesus was saying in this illustration. The church is something high, like a tower. It is. We exist in the community. I know you're thinking steeple right now. No. Nothing to do with the building. It's got to do with the people. The church is the people of God. It is not the building in which we worship. And the people of God stand, I believe, in community. We stand in our society high. And we are on display there. And what Jesus was saying is being a follower of mine means you're going to be on display like this. And my reputation is at stake because I'm no longer in the community, but you are. So you are a Christian, which means a little Christ. You are little Jesus on display high in the community. And when you fail, as in get halfway and bail on me, my reputation gets hurt. No halfway measures when it comes to following me. I need 100% commitment because I need high towers that are built for my reputation in all sorts of societies all around the world. Does that make sense? It's a beautiful illustration. It really is an apt illustration. But here's the problem I had of the passage. I'm like, but I can't do that very well, Lord. Then it dawned on me, there's calculations involved. And what you're going to find when you start calculating being a high tower for the Lord in your society, you're going to find and discover something to be true. You can't do it. It's not like you're going to say, I've got all it takes. I've got enough. I can build this tower. No. You're going to discover the very opposite. I don't have enough and I can't complete this job. I need outside resource. And praise the Lord, He has given that to us in Himself. We need Jesus to continue to build the church and put Jesus on display in the community. And we come to Christ acknowledging our need for Him. We come to Christ leaning on His supply to remain faithful and to finish the job, to finish the project. I hope this illustration has come alive for you. That's the first one. We are stones to build the church. The second is we are soldiers to beat the enemy. Grab your pen, write it down. We are soldiers to beat the enemy. I've said many times in preaching, because I believe it with all my heart, that Christian life is a war. It's not a walk in the park. The Christian life is a war. That's why there's all stuff to be said about armor and weapons and things like that. So we're in a war. This text tells me that we're in a war against an enemy. And I know that to be very true. We know his name. Taking this parable to heart, I thought through every detail and found myself making a few mistakes that I think lots of scholars do sometimes. We take parables and we try to force every little detail into every little hole. So I'm trying to avoid doing that, but at the same time, I'm also trying to find the thrust of the parable, that one massive truth that God, or Jesus on this occasion, is using to punch us in the stomach, to get our attention, to drive home, so that we might change and transform around it. And so I think I found it. I believe that this text is speaking about exactly the same thing as the builder, until that line about the peace. That threw me completely. Because who wants to go make peace with the enemy? And I just couldn't work out why Jesus was saying it would be better to make peace than to go to war. It dawned on me that Jesus was making distinction to thin out the crowd. Listen to this. Rather, we make peace with the enemy / the world than abandon Jesus on the battlefield. That's what's going on in this passage for me. Carefully looking at every nuance of the wording that was used here by Jesus, Jesus was saying, you know what, it would be better that you don't dabble in the world and then follow me a little bit. It would be better for you just to make peace with the world than for you to call yourself a believer and a follower. And when it comes down to warfare, you bail. Ouch. I mean, I can just imagine there's absolute silence in that crowd. Guys are feeling awkward. Like, how do I get out of this space? I'm not feeling comfortable here at all. Just want to go home. That's exactly what Jesus is saying to the church today. We are soldiers, and we have a job to do in terms of our warfare to beat the enemy. This is not play. We are stones to build a building. We are soldiers to beat the enemy. Thirdly, we are salt to better the world. This one's beautiful as well. We are salty, and I think in the sermon series already there's been 2 or 3 messages that have been around this same concept. So Jesus obviously had this illustration in his mind when he taught, using the ideas of salt. And what does salt do? What does salt do? It brings flavor. It enhances flavor. It preserves decay. Been used as a preservative for ages. I don't know about if you've ever experienced this, but you have some biltong. What's coming next? Something to drink. Because salt makes you thirsty. And all of that applies to what Jesus was saying. We are, as the church, genuine followers, disciples of Christ. We are salty in our community. So wherever you are, like in your workspace, your school space, your sports space, family space, you are, according to Jesus, salt, and you add flavor to the world. The world likes to think that it has all the flavor, but it doesn't. It's dull. It is almost tasteless. And so many years that I've walked with the Lord, the more I've discovered this, that the world is tasteless. It is so short of anything tasty. And Christians exist in these spheres of influence to bring flavor to what life is all about in Christ. We're also there to stop the rot. I mean, when Christians take a stand against abortion, we are stopping the rot in society. And there are countless other things that we stand for, and it might cost us very dearly, maybe our own life one day. But we take a stand because, like Jesus was saying here, real followers push back all that frot in our society and in our world. And of course, we make people thirsty in the process. If you're a genuine follower of the Lord and God is doing that transforming work in your life, sanctifying you to be like himself, and you're representing Jesus in the community, man, people are going to look at you and say, I really am thirsty for that. How do I get that kind of marriage? How do I get that kind of attitude? How do I have that kind of motivation? Well, that's what being salty is all about in the world. Sad thing is, they're fake followers in the crowd. Fake followers. So they don't have any saltiness at all. And they don't prevent any decay. And they don't add any flavor. So much worldliness has crept into your life. Well, that dirt and that dust and the impurities into the salt, that you've lost your flavor. And look what Jesus says. I want to just say this as a warning. It's very hard / impossible almost to come back from there. Don't play with the world. May I beg you as your pastor, don't play with the world. Because dirt comes in, it's very difficult to get it out. Holistically speaking, I go back and I look at these 3 things. Stones to build the church, and soldiers to beat the enemy, and salt to better our world. Because trust me, following Jesus in this horrible, evil place infinitely better than not. Is all part of the heavy lifting of what it means to be a Christian. Holistically, heavy lifting, picking up your own cross is going to mean 3 categories: suffering, sacrifice, and persecution on the course that is marked out for us of following Jesus in his footsteps. This is something that we need to accept today by God's grace. And what I mean by those very frilly Christian kind of terms is understanding that we can't do these footsteps on our own. We've got to accept this by God's grace, his empowering, his enabling for us to be followers of him. It's the only way. They might think, sure, this is too heavy for me. The heavy lifting and the saying goodbye, it's just too much. Let me encourage you with the last point. And before I go there, I want to give you a quote. If you think following Jesus is going to cost you a lot, you are right. Following Jesus will cost you a lot. But it'll cost you infinitely more if you don't follow him. Think about it. Every genuine follower of the Lord right now needs to be thinking back to their conversion days and what you've been rescued from, and the consequences of that sin in your life eternally, and recognize that the cost is not as high as the cost that would be paid for not following Jesus. Amen? Let's just get that under our belt this morning. Then I want to end this way with the third point. Following Jesus means great gain. Take a big deep breath. Let's hear from the Lord's word. Following Jesus means saying goodbye. It means heavy lifting, but it also means great gain. The first idea I want to talk about here is Jesus' expectation of us. That heavy stuff, heavy lifting and saying goodbye, is not higher than he was willing to pay himself. So don't look to Jesus and say, Jesus, you don't have any clue about what you're asking me to do, because he does have a clue. Around the next bend for him would be an actual cross in history to prove the fact that Jesus knew exactly what he was talking about in terms of his understanding of devotion. Not my will be done, but your will be done. And he finished it. He finished it all the way. He followed God all the way. His cross to bear was literally around the next bend. And he did what is demanded of us in this passage. I would sum it up as being self-sacrifice. You want a model to follow? Jesus is your model. He is the one that has gone ahead, and we walk literally in his footprints. The second idea I want to talk about under this little point is this balance between cost and gain. The loss is outweighed by the gain. The gain outweighs the loss. The gain outweighs the cost. And this is a big biblical concept that I want to actually drive home clearly from Paul. Because Paul spoke about this in Philippians chapter 3, verse 7. Turn there real quick. It's one verse. Philippians 3:7. He said, because I think it had nestled with him, and it kind of, he had accepted by grace what discipleship is all about. So let's listen to Paul on this. But whatever gain, there's the gain, the profit, the credentials that I had. So I considered my life to be of gain and profit and credential. I now count as loss for the sake of Christ. I now look, after a decision has been made to follow the Lord, I now consider those previous gains as loss compared to a greater gain that I've gained for the sake of Christ. That's incredible. What he considered gain before, he now considers to be damaging, a disadvantage to him spiritually speaking, because now I have gained Christ. So the question I have now, in terms of this for the sake of Jesus, Paul was saying, man, Jesus came into my life and he's turned my entire world upside down. Has Jesus done that for you? He's come in and my priorities are on their head. My value system of what I considered gain before is now absolute loss. He goes on to describe using other wording to describe how much of a loss it is in that same text. Has Jesus done the same for you in turning your life upside down? Relationship with Jesus has become of first importance, devotion, way higher than anything else that I considered gain before. This is a definition of what it means to follow Jesus. Somebody devoted, somebody who's a Christian, somebody who's a believer, has had their entire world turned upside down. Has Jesus done that for you? Does your relationship with Him mean most to you right now? After pondering all the cost and all the heavy lifting and all the saying goodbye and embracing that by grace, can you say with me that I choose Jesus right now? I don't care how long it's been you've been following the Lord. I'm asking you this morning, can you say, is Jesus enough for me? Does He mean most to me? For those that are true followers, not fake followers, Jesus is our hope. Jesus is our salvation. He is our life. Are you hearing me? He's our life. Jesus is our boast. Jesus is our strength. He is our victory. He is our joy. He is our righteousness. He is our friend. Jesus is our healer. He's our advocate. He's our helper. He's our Lord. He's, in fact, our King. He is our all. Amen? He is our all. Jesus, in fact, to sum it all up, is our gain Himself. He is our gain. Following Jesus means a brand new identity. A brand new identity. Where an individual, a man, a woman, a boy or a girl, now is called a Jesus follower. Let's pray. Lord, we've all been challenged by your words here. And I don't doubt that even this crowd this morning might be thinned by this message. Because the bar is high. The expectation is big. But Lord, I think of how you have modeled this for us. That you have paid the ultimate cost and invited us to follow in your footprints. I think about the consequences of not following you today. I think about the standard of your devotion, oh God, your self-sacrifice. And Lord, I am wooed. I'm compelled to want to sign up. I pray that many would do that today, considering the cost carefully, weighing up the cost, calculating the cost. That there would be some today that would still say, sign me up. Here I am, Lord. I want to follow you. I'm going to stick with the crowd, those that are committed and devoted to Jesus. Lord, I thank you for the gains that we have in you, Lord, and I think both now and eternally of all the flavor that you have brought to our life and the banquet that's coming. And I'm motivated, Lord, to keep following. Help us, empower us by your Spirit. Give us all the resource, all the ammunition, all the supply that we need to follow you well until the end, no matter the cost. I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. God bless you guys. Thanks for coming today.